The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss and Jake Morrison stepped onto the docking platform of Kepler Station University. He carried only a small bag over his shoulder and walked with quiet steps. Around him, other students talked loudly and laughed as they met friends or said goodbye to family members. Jake just stood there watching. The station was huge. It spun slowly in space, creating gravity for the thousands of people who lived and studied there. Through the big windows, Jake could see stars and the bright blue planet below. Ships came and went constantly, bringing students from 12 different worlds and species. A tall woman with blue skin walked past Jake. Her head was smooth and shiny like crystal, and when she looked at people, her eyes glowed softly. She was an Altarian, one of the smartest species in the galaxy. Behind her came a group of insect-like creatures with 4 arms each. They were Zephyrians, and they talked in high, buzzing voices about quantum math problems that would make most humans dizzy. Jake watched them all but said nothing. He had read about these species before coming here, but seeing them in person felt strange. They moved differently than humans. They thought differently too. "You must be Jake Morrison," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a middle-aged human woman with kind eyes and graying hair. "I'm Professor Linda Hayes. I teach human literature here. Welcome to Kepler Station." "Thank you," Jake said quietly. His voice was soft, almost hard to hear over the noise of the busy platform. Professor Hayes looked at Jake's file on her tablet. "It says here you transferred from New Sydney Colony Technical College. That's quite a change, coming from a small colony school to here." "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied. He did not say more. Professor Hayes waited for Jake to explain why he had transferred, but he just stood there looking uncomfortable. She had seen shy students before, but something about Jake seemed different. Most transfer students were excited or nervous. Jake just looked tired. "Well, let me show you to your dormitory," she said finally. "You'll be staying in Wing 7 with some other students." They walked through long hallways filled with students from many different worlds. Jake saw creatures he had only read about in books. There were tall, thin beings with silver skin who moved like they were floating. There were short, furry animals that walked on 2 legs and carried books in pouches on their bellies. Some students looked almost human but had extra arms or different colored skin. Most of the alien students barely looked at Jake as he passed. To them, humans were nothing special. Earth was a young world with simple technology. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago, which was very recent compared to civilizations that were thousands of years old. "Here we are," Professor Hayes said as they stopped at a door marked 7C. "You'll be sharing with 2 other students. Crix is an Altarian studying advanced physics. He's very smart but can be a bit proud. Sit 9 is a Zephyrian working on biochemistry. She's actually quite friendly once you get used to her buzzing voice." Jake nodded and entered the room. It was bigger than he had expected, with 3 separate sleeping areas. The walls were covered with charts and equations that hurt to look at. In one corner, a complex machine hummed softly while displaying numbers that changed constantly. "Crix built that," Professor Hayes explained, noticing Jake staring at the machine. "It calculates probability waves or something like that. I don't really understand it myself." As if summoned by his name, Crix walked into the room. He was tall and thin with crystal blue skin that seemed to glow from inside. His head was larger than a human's, and his eyes were completely black. When he saw Jake, his expression showed mild annoyance. "Another human," Crix said in perfect English, though his voice had a musical quality to it. "I was hoping for someone more intellectually stimulating this time." "Crix, be nice," Professor Hayes said firmly. "Jake is a transfer student from the colonies." "The colonies," Crix repeated, making it sound like a disease. "How wonderful. I suppose you'll want to know how everything works here. Humans always need so much explanation." Jake looked at Crix calmly. "I'll figure it out," he said. Something in Jake's voice made Crix pause. Most humans got angry or defensive when Altarians acted superior. Jake just stood there with no expression on his face, as if insults meant nothing to him. A buzzing sound came from the 3rd sleeping area, and Zit 9 emerged. She looked like a giant praying mantis but walked upright on two legs. Her forearms moved constantly as she talked, and her compound eyes reflected the room's light in rainbow patterns. "New roommate? Yes, yes?" She buzzed excitedly. "I am Zit9, but you can call me Z if human mouth cannot make proper sounds. I study how different species process nutrients. Very interesting work, very complex." "I'm Jake," he said simply. "Jake? Yes, yes. Good sound. Easy to remember." Z tilted her triangular head at him. "You seem very calm for human. Most of your species are very emotional, very loud. This is good change." Over the next few days, Jake settled into a routine. He attended his classes on time, sat in the back, and never spoke unless directly asked a question. His professors noted his presence, but nothing more. Jake seemed to absorb information without effort, but he never showed interest in participating in discussions. In his engineering basics class, Professor Chen explained how faster-than-light drives worked. Most human students asked lots of questions and took detailed notes. Jake just listened, his face showing no emotion at all. "Mr. Morrison," Professor Chen said during one class, "do you have any questions about quantum field manipulation?" "No, sir," Jake replied quietly. "Are you following the material?" "Yes, sir." Professor Chen wanted to ask more, but Jake's calm stare made him uncomfortable. There was something in those eyes that seemed much older than a young college student should have. The only time Jake showed any reaction was during Professor Williams's military history class. Professor Williams was a former Earth military officer who now taught about conflicts between different species. When he mentioned the recent wars in the Outer Rim territories, Jake's hands tightened into fists. His jaw muscles tensed, and for just a moment his calm mask slipped. "The Outer Rim conflicts were particularly brutal," Professor Williams said. "Both sides used tactics that crossed moral boundaries. Many soldiers came home changed by what they experienced." Jake stood up, suddenly. "May I be excused?" he asked. Professor Williams looked surprised. "Is everything all right?" "I don't feel well," Jake said, though his voice was steady. "Of course. Feel better." Jake walked out of the classroom without looking back. Professor Williams watched him go, frowning. Something about the way Jake had reacted seemed familiar, but he could not place what it was. That evening, Jake sat alone in the dormitory common area. Other students laughed and talked around him, but he might as well have been invisible. Crix and Z were working on homework together, their different ways of thinking somehow complementing each other perfectly. "Your roommate is strange," Crix said to Z, not bothering to lower his voice. "Most humans try to make friends or at least talk to people. He just watches everything like he's studying us." "Maybe he is shy," Z buzzed back. "Some species take time to adjust to new environments. Or maybe he thinks he's better than everyone else," Crix suggested. "Humans can be quite arrogant despite their limitations." Jake heard every word but showed no reaction. He continued reading his book, turning pages at regular intervals. But if someone had looked closely, they would have noticed that his eyes were not following the text. Instead, he was watching the other students memorizing their habits and routines. Late that night, after Crix and Z had gone to sleep, Jake lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. Through the thin walls, he could hear the sounds of the station around him. Footsteps in the hallways, the hum of machinery, the distant chatter of students who stayed up late. He had been on the station for a week now, and everyone had accepted him as just another quiet transfer student. No one suspected that Jake Morrison had died in a shuttle accident 6 months ago, and that the person using his name was someone else entirely, someone who had come to Kepler Station University for reasons that had nothing to do with education. Next morning, Crix did not come back to the dormitory. Jake woke up at exactly 6 in the morning, just like every day since he arrived at the station. He looked over at Crix's bed and saw that it was still empty. The crystal blue sheets were folded neatly, exactly as they had been the day before. Z was already awake, buzzing softly to herself as she organized her study materials with her forearms. She noticed Jake looking at Crix's bed. He did not come back last night, she said. This is not normal for Crix. He always returns before midnight, even when he works late in the physics lab. Maybe he found somewhere else to sleep, Jake said, quietly. Perhaps. But Crix likes his routine. He does not change habits easily. Z's compound eyes reflected worry. Should we report this to dormitory supervisor? Jake shrugged. Give him another day. College students do strange things sometimes. But Jake already knew that Crix would not be coming back. Not ever. The morning passed normally. Jake attended his classes and sat in his usual spot at the back of each room. He took notes in neat handwriting and answered questions when professors called on him. To everyone around him, he seemed like the same quiet transfer student he had always been. Lunch, Jake sat alone at a corner table in the main cafeteria. The huge room was filled with students from dozens of different species. Some ate food that looked normal to human eyes. Others consumed things that glowed or moved or smelled terrible. The noise was constant. Voices, buzzing, clicking sounds, and musical tones from species that communicated in ways humans could barely understand. Jake watched it all with calm eyes. He seemed to be reading a book about engineering, but his attention was really focused on the patterns around him. Which students always sat together, who ate at what times, where the security cameras were positioned, which areas of the cafeteria had blind spots. Commander Lisa Hayes walked into the cafeteria with 2 security officers behind her. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. Jake had seen her around the station before but had never spoken to her. The conversation in the cafeteria grew quieter as students noticed the security team. Commander Hayes spoke briefly to some Altarian students at a table near the windows. Their crystal skins seemed to dim with worry as they shook their heads and pointed toward different areas of the station. "Attention, students," Commander Hayes announced, her voice carrying clearly across the large room. "We are looking for Crix 7738, an Altarian physics student. He has not been seen since yesterday afternoon. If anyone has information about his whereabouts, please contact station security immediately." Worried conversations broke out among the students. Z hurried over to Commander Hayes, her forearms gesturing as she spoke in rapid, buzzing tones. Jake could not hear what they were saying, but he could see the concern on Z's insect face. After a few minutes, Commander Hayes approached Jake's table. She sat down across from him without being invited. "You're Jake Morrison, correct?" she asked. "Crix's roommate?" "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied. He closed his book and gave her his full attention, but his expression remained neutral. "When did you last see Crix?" "Yesterday morning before classes. He left early for a study group. Did he mention where he was going after that?" "No, we don't talk much." Commander Hayes studied Jake's face. Most people showed some emotion when questioned by security. Nervousness, concern, curiosity. Jake looked like he was discussing the weather. "Are you worried about your roommate?" she asked. "I figure he can take care of himself," Jake said. Maybe he just needed space. Living with strangers can be stressful. Most students would be concerned if their roommate disappeared. Most students are more social than I am. Commander Hayes made notes on her tablet. Something about Jake bothered her, but she could not identify what it was. His answers were reasonable, and his manner was polite. Still, there was something cold about him that did not feel right. "If you think of anything else, contact me immediately," she said, standing up. Of course. That afternoon, Jake attended Professor Williams's military history class. The topic was defensive strategies used by different species during wartime. Jake listened carefully as Professor Williams explained how Altarians use their telepathic abilities to coordinate group defenses. "The key weakness in Altarian defensive patterns," Professor Williams said, "is that they rely heavily on psychic communication. If you can approach them without hostile thoughts, their mental guards remain down until it's too late." Several students asked questions about how this weakness had been exploited in past conflicts. Jake said nothing, but his hand moved slightly, as if taking invisible notes. After class, Jake walked to the lower levels of the station. These areas were less crowded, mostly used for maintenance and storage. The lighting was dimmer here, and the sounds of the upper levels faded to a distant hum. He found what he was looking for in Storage Bay 7. Crix's body lay behind a stack of supply containers, hidden from casual view. The crystal blue skin that had once glowed with inner light was now dull and gray. Dark blue blood had pooled beneath the body. Jake knelt beside the corpse and examined his work. The wounds were precise, a single strike to the base of the skull where Altarian nerve clusters were most vulnerable. Crix had died instantly, probably without even realizing he was in danger. Someone had approached the young Altarian with calm, peaceful thoughts. Crix's telepathic senses had detected no threat, so his natural defenses never activated. By the time he realized what was happening, it was already over. Jake checked his watch. The body would be discovered soon. Maintenance crews swept this area every few days, and the smell would eventually attract attention. He had planned it that way. 2 days later, the maintenance crew found Crix exactly as Jake had expected. The discovery sent shockwaves through the university. Students who had lived their entire lives in peaceful academic environments suddenly faced the reality that violence could reach them even here. Commander Hayes called all of Crix's known associates for questioning. Jake sat in the security office and answered questions with the same calm politeness he showed everyone. "Where were you 2 nights ago between 8 and midnight?" Hayes asked. "In the library until it closed at 10, then back to my room." "Can anyone verify that?" "The librarian might remember seeing me. I was at the same table I always use." Hayes checked the automated logs. Jake's student ID had indeed been used to enter and exit the library at the times he claimed. Security cameras showed him at his usual table reading quietly. "What did you think of Crix?" "He was smart but arrogant. He looked down on humans." "Did that bother you?" "Not really. Lots of species think they're better than humans. Getting upset about it would be a waste of energy." After an hour of questions, Hayes had to admit that Jake's story was solid. His alibi checked out, and he showed no signs of guilt or deception. Still, something about him continued to bother. Her Dr. Alex Turner, the station's chief medical officer, completed his examination of Crix's body that evening. His report was disturbing. The killer had known exactly where to strike to cause instant death. The wound showed precise knowledge of Altarian anatomy, knowledge that would require extensive study to acquire. Whoever did this has medical training or military experience, Dr. Turner told Commander Hayes. The attack was too perfect to be random violence. Any idea what kind of weapon was used? Something sharp and narrow, possibly a combat knife, but it could have been a medical instrument or even a simple tool if the user knew what they were doing. Hayes reviewed the files of every human on the station. Most were students from wealthy families or faculty members, with clean backgrounds. A few had minor criminal records, but nothing that suggested capability for this kind of murder. Jake's file was remarkably clean. Good grades at his previous school, no disciplinary issues, letters of recommendation from professors who described him as quiet and hard-working. If anything, he seemed too ordinary. 3 days after Crix's body was found, Z did not show up for her morning biochemistry presentation. Professor Davis waited 15 minutes before marking her absent and moving on to the next student. Z was found that evening in the hydroponic gardens where the station grew fresh food. Her insect body lay among the tomato plants, dark green blood staining the soil. Like Crix, she had been killed with surgical precision, a single wound that had severed the nerve cord that ran along her back. This time, Dr. Turner's examination revealed something even more troubling. The killer had known exactly how Zephyrian anatomy worked. The wound had been placed at the one spot where Z's natural armor was weakest, striking between segments of her exoskeleton with perfect accuracy. "This isn't random," Dr. Turner told Hayes as they stood over Z's body. "Someone is systematically hunting alien students, and they know exactly how to kill each species." Commander Hayes felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool air in the gardens. 2 murders with the same professional precision suggested they were dealing with someone very dangerous. That night, she called an emergency meeting with the university administration. Within hours, new security protocols were in place. Students had to travel in groups. Dormitory access was restricted after dark. Security patrols increased throughout the station, but Jake Morrison continued his daily routine unchanged, attending classes and studying alone as if nothing had happened. Fear spread through Kepler Station University like a disease. Students who had once walked freely through the corridors now moved in nervous groups, their eyes constantly watching for danger. The cheerful conversations that once filled the cafeteria were replaced by worried whispers and suspicious glances. Parents from across the galaxy demanded their children be sent home immediately. The Altarian government threatened to withdraw all their students from Earth universities. The Zephyrian Council issued a formal complaint about station security. For the first time in 300 years, the peaceful academic environment was breaking apart. Dean Martha Collins held emergency meetings every day. She was a small woman with gray hair who had spent her entire career believing that education could bring different species together. Now she watched her life's work crumble as fear poisoned the relationships between students. "We need answers," she told Commander Hayes during one late-night meeting. "The galactic community is losing faith in our ability to protect their children. If we don't solve this soon, the exchange program will be shut down permanently." Commander Hayes rubbed her tired eyes. She had been working 18-hour days since the murders began, but the killer remained invisible. "We're doing everything we can. Security patrols have tripled, all common areas are monitored, and students must sign in and out of their dormitories. It's not enough. 2 students are dead and we have no suspects." "Actually, we do have one lead," Hayes said quietly. "Dr. Turner thinks our killer has military training. The wounds are too precise, too professional. This isn't some angry student with a knife. This is someone who knows how to kill efficiently and quietly." Dean Collins looked horrified. "You think a soldier is doing this? Or someone with similar training? We're reviewing the backgrounds of everyone on the station, paying special attention to anyone with combat experience." What Hayes didn't mention was her growing suspicion about Jake Morrison. The quiet transfer student bothered her in ways she couldn't explain. His complete lack of emotion during questioning felt wrong. Most innocent people showed some reaction when discussing murdered friends, but Jake remained as calm as if they were talking about homework assignments. Jake continued his routine despite the increased security. He attended classes, studied alone, and returned to his dormitory at the same time each night. The new restrictions didn't seem to affect him at all, which was strange considering how much they bothered everyone else. In his xenobiology class, Professor Martinez discussed the physical differences between species. She explained how evolution had shaped each race to survive in their home environments. The Altarians developed telepathy to coordinate hunting groups. The Zephyrians grew armor-like skin to protect against predators. The aquatic Nereidans had gills and pressure-resistant bodies for deep ocean living. Jake listened to every word with intense focus. While other students took notes about academic concepts, Jake was learning about weaknesses. Every species had evolved strengths, but evolution also created vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone who understood them. "The Nereidans are particularly interesting," Professor Martinez said, showing pictures of the blue-skinned aquatic species. "They can survive underwater for hours, but their breathing system makes them vulnerable to certain atmospheric changes. Their gills are very sensitive to chemical irritants." Jake made careful notes in his notebook. To anyone watching, he appeared to be a dedicated student. In reality, he was planning murder. That evening, Jake visited the station's swimming complex. It was a huge facility with pools designed for different species. Some pools contained regular water for humans and similar species. Others held special mixtures for aquatic beings who needed different chemical balances to survive. The Nereidan pool was kept separate from the others. The water was treated with minerals from their home world and maintained at a specific temperature and pressure. Warning signs in multiple languages warned other species not to enter, as the water could be harmful to non-Nereidans. Jake studied the pool area carefully. Security cameras covered most of the space, but there were blind spots near the equipment, rooms where filters and chemical systems were housed. The facility was usually empty late at night when most students were sleeping or studying. He made mental notes about the layout, the camera positions, and the daily schedules of the cleaning staff. Like his previous victims, this would require careful timing and precise execution. 3 days later, Noru 7 was found floating in the Narration pool. She was a gentle creature who studied interspecies communication, hoping to improve relationships between different worlds. Her blue skin had turned gray and her gill slits were swollen shut. Dr. Turner's examination revealed that Noru 7 had been killed by someone who understood Narration physiology perfectly. A small amount of chemical poison had been introduced directly into her gills, causing them to swell and preventing her from breathing either air or water. She had essentially drowned in her own body. "This is getting worse," Dr. Turner told Commander Hayes as they reviewed the autopsy results. "The killer isn't just knowledgeable about alien anatomy. They're adapting their methods, becoming more sophisticated with each murder." Hayes studied the crime scene photos. What kind of chemical was used? Something that occurs naturally in certain earth plants. It's not regulated because it's harmless to humans and most other species. But for Nereidans, even a small amount is deadly. So our killer knows earth chemistry as well as alien biology. It appears so. We're dealing with someone who has extensive knowledge of multiple scientific fields. Commander Hayes decided it was time to take a harder look at Jake Morrison. She pulled his complete file and spread it across her desk. On the surface, everything looked normal. Average grades, standard recommendations, typical background for a colony student seeking better education opportunities. But as Hayes studied the details more carefully, she began to notice oddities. Jake's application essays were well written, but completely generic. They could have been written by anyone about anything. His recommendation letters praised his work ethic but contained no personal details or memorable incidents. His academic transcript showed steady but unremarkable performance. Most troubling was Jake's complete lack of digital presence. In an age where everyone shared their lives online, Jake Morrison had no social media accounts, no posted photos, no digital footprint of any kind before his application to the university. For a young person, this absence was almost impossible. Hayes decided to dig deeper. She contacted the registrar's office at New Sydney Colony Technical College, where Jake claimed to have studied. The response she received made her blood run cold. "We have no record of Jake Morrison attending our institution," the registrar wrote back. "Our enrollment records for the past 5 years show no student by that name. If someone is using our college as a reference, they are doing so fraudulently." Hayes immediately tried to contact Jake's listed references, but the communication addresses bounced back as invalid. The professors who had supposedly written his recommendations didn't exist. Even his home address on New Sydney Colony led to an empty lot where no residence had ever been built. Jake Morrison was a complete fiction. Hayes rushed to Jake's dormitory, but when she arrived, she found his room empty. His few possessions were gone, and there was no sign he had ever lived there. The maintenance panel in his wall had been pried open, revealing a hidden space behind it. Inside the hidden space, Hayes found Jake's real purpose at the university. Dozens of anatomical diagrams covered the walls, showing detailed drawings of every species represented at the school. Each diagram was covered with handwritten notes identifying weak points, optimal attack angles, and effective killing methods. Diagrams weren't just academic studies. They were assassination plans. At the bottom of the hidden space, Hayes found a list of names written in the same careful handwriting. Crix and Z were crossed out with red ink. Noru 7 had a red line through her name as well. Below them were dozens of other names, students from every alien species at the university. Jake had been working his way through a kill list, and he was far from finished. Hayes immediately ordered a station-wide lockdown. Security teams sealed all exits and began searching every room, corridor, and maintenance space. Emergency alerts went out to all students and faculty, warning them that a dangerous individual was loose on the station. But Jake Morrison, or whoever he really was, had vanished into the maze of service tunnels and hidden passages that ran throughout the orbital facility. The quiet transfer student had revealed himself as something far more dangerous, a methodical killer who had been studying his prey with the patience of an expert hunter. As security teams searched frantically through the station, Jake moved silently, through spaces most people didn't even know existed. He had memorized the station's layout weeks ago, identifying escape routes and hiding places that would allow him to continue his work despite the increased security. The hunt was just beginning, and Jake had no intention of being caught before. He finished what he had come to do. In his mind, he wasn't committing murder. He was conducting a necessary experiment, proving that human knowledge and determination could overcome any alien advantage. The station-wide lockdown entered its second day with no sign of the killer. Security teams had searched every public area, every dormitory room, and every classroom. Jake Morrison had disappeared like smoke, leaving only fear and questions behind. Commander, Hayes worked without sleep, coordinating search teams and reviewing security footage. The cameras showed Jake's normal routine until the day before the lockdown, then nothing. He had simply vanished, as if he knew exactly where the blind spots were. He's still here, Hayes told her security chief during a brief meeting. Someone doesn't just disappear from a space station. He's hiding somewhere we haven't looked yet. What about the service tunnels? Officer Brad Collins suggested. They run throughout the entire station. Most people don't even know they exist. We've checked the main tunnels, but there might be smaller passages, maintenance shafts that aren't on the official blueprints. Hayes was interrupted by an urgent message on her communication device. The sender's identity made her pause. It was marked as classified military communication from Earth. Commander Hayes, this is Colonel Ben Parker, with Earth Military Intelligence. The message began. We understand you're dealing with a situation involving someone using the identity Jake Morrison. We need to talk immediately. Within an hour, Hayes was in a secure communication room speaking directly to Colonel Parker via encrypted video link. The colonel was a stern-looking man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Jake Morrison died in a shuttle accident 6 months ago, Colonel Parker explained without wasting time on pleasantries. The person on your station is someone else entirely. We believe it's Ryan Cross, a former special operations soldier who went missing from our custody. Hayes felt her stomach drop. Special operations? Cross was part of an experimental program called Project Nightfall. We were developing training protocols for potential conflicts with alien species. The project was classified and officially terminated after ethical concerns were raised. What kind of training? Colonel Parker's expression grew darker. Combat techniques specifically designed to exploit alien physiological weaknesses. Cross was one of our most successful subjects. He demonstrated an unusual ability to study enemy vulnerabilities and develop effective countermeasures. Hayes thought about the anatomical diagrams found in Jake's room, covered with notes about attack, points, and killing methods. How did he learn so much about alien anatomy? We provided detailed training materials about every known species, medical texts, autopsy reports, combat analysis from previous conflicts. Cross absorbed it all like a sponge. He could look at an alien and immediately identify how to disable or kill it most efficiently. And you let him loose? Cross suffered a complete psychological breakdown during his final mission. He was ordered to eliminate what intelligence claimed were enemy combatants in a refugee camp. The targets turned out to be civilian families, including children. Cross had a severe reaction to what he was forced to do. Hayes closed her eyes. She was beginning to understand the mind of the killer they were hunting. He blames aliens for what happened to him. In a way, yes, Cross was hospitalized for severe PTSD and paranoid delusions. He became convinced that aliens were inherently dangerous to humanity, that the peaceful coexistence everyone talks about is just a mask hiding their true hostile intentions. Where has he been for the past 6 months? We don't know. He escaped from a military hospital and disappeared completely. We've been looking for him ever since. When reports came in about alien students being killed with military precision, we knew it had to be Cross. Colonel Parker leaned forward on the screen. Commander, you need to understand something. Cross isn't just dangerous because of his training. He's completely detached from reality. In his mind, he's not committing murder. He thinks he's conducting a necessary demonstration to prove human superiority before aliens can strike first. After the communication ended, Hayes sat alone in the dark room, processing what she had learned. She was hunting a trained killer who saw aliens as enemy soldiers rather than innocent students. someone who had been taught to view different species as threats to be eliminated. She needed to think like Cross to find him. Where would a paranoid ex-soldier hide on a space station? Somewhere he could observe his targets while remaining invisible to security. Hayes pulled up the station blueprints on her computer, but instead of looking at the official layouts, she studied the areas between the marked spaces. Every large structure had hidden areas, gaps between walls, spaces above ceilings, maintenance crawlways that didn't appear on normal maps. The central hub of the station was the most complex area, with multiple levels and systems running in all directions. If Cross wanted to hide while maintaining access to the entire station, that would be the logical choice. Hayes gathered her best security officers and headed for the central hub. They moved carefully through the public areas, then accessed maintenance, passages that led deeper into the station's core. The deeper they went, the more cramped and dark the passages became. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the metal walls. The sound of the station's life support systems grew louder, masking footsteps and voices. They found Cross in a forgotten maintenance chamber deep in the hub's center. The small room was filled with monitoring equipment that gave him access to security cameras throughout the station. Charts and diagrams covered every wall surface, not just anatomical studies, but detailed plans for attacking different areas of the university. Cross sat calmly at a makeshift desk writing in a notebook. He looked up when the security team entered, showing no surprise or fear at being discovered. His eyes were completely empty of normal human emotion. "Commander Hayes," he said in the same quiet voice Jake Morrison had used. "I wondered when you would find me." "Ryan Cross, you're under arrest for the murders of 3 students," Hayes said, keeping her weapon trained on him. Cross laughed, but the sound had no humor in it. "Murders? Is that what you call it when soldiers eliminate enemy combatants?" "They were students, Cross, children trying to get an education. They were aliens infiltrating human institutions," Cross replied matter-of-factly. "I was demonstrating how easily they could be eliminated if they ever decided to turn against us. Humans need to understand that we're stronger than they think." Hayes looked around the room and saw the full extent of Cross's madness. Lists of student names were organized by species, with detailed attack plans written beside each one. He had been preparing to kill dozens of innocent young people. "The war is over, Cross. There is no enemy here." "The war is never over," Cross said, standing slowly. "It just changes form. They want us to believe they're peaceful, but I know better. I've seen what they can do when they think no one is watching." Cross moved suddenly, faster than Hayes expected. His military training was still sharp despite his broken mind. He knocked the weapon from her hands and struck her in the throat, causing her to stumble backward. But Hayes was ready for him. She had studied Cross's file and knew his combat techniques. As he lunged forward, she ducked low and swept his legs, sending him crashing into the monitoring equipment. The fight was brief but intense. Cross fought with the skill of a trained soldier, but his mental state worked against him. His movements were too aggressive, too predictable. Hayes managed to subdue him with help from her officers, though not before he had inflicted several injuries. As they placed restraints on Cross, he continued talking in his calm, empty voice. "You don't understand what you're doing. I was protecting humanity. I was showing them that we don't have to be afraid." "The only thing you showed was that fear can turn people into monsters," Hayes replied. The arrest of Ryan Cross sent shockwaves through both the university and the galactic community. Earth's government faced serious diplomatic consequences as other species questioned humanity's fitness for membership in galactic civilization. The academic exchange program was suspended indefinitely, while new security protocols were developed. Many alien families withdrew their children from human institutions, and several species reconsidered their relationships with Earth entirely. The actions of one broken soldier had damaged decades of careful diplomatic work. But not all the consequences were negative. Dr. Turner worked with alien colleagues to establish new protocols for identifying and helping traumatized individuals before they reached Cross's level of breakdown. The tragedy became a catalyst for better understanding of combat stress and its long-term effects. Cross was returned to Earth for treatment in a secure military medical facility. Experts hoped that proper therapy might eventually help him distinguish between reality and the paranoid fantasies that had driven him to murder. Commander Hayes often thought about the case in the months that followed. Cross had been trained to see aliens as enemies, then abandoned when that training broke his mind. The real tragedy wasn't just the 3 young lives that were lost, but the human life that was destroyed by fear and hatred. The university eventually reopened with new security measures and counseling programs for all species. Students from different worlds came together again, determined not to let one person's madness destroy the dream of peaceful cooperation.